We're excited to bring Tim Ash up to talk about the war between brands and direct marketers. And sometimes it's put into that context as a war. Really, it's a relationship. It's two-sided, and there's always pluses and minuses and ways to improve that relationship. Tim is the CEO of a company called Site Tuners. He's also the founder of the Conversion Conference and best-selling author of Landing Page Optimization. From what I hear, Tim is also a pretty good salsa dancer for a white guy. Please help me welcome Tim Ash to the stage.
Thank you, Warren. Good morning, everybody. Oh, God, that was, what's the technical term? Weak ass? Let's try that again. Hey, New York, we going to have a problem here? Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right, it's a little bit better. I am the only thing standing between you and the expo hall or your lunch, your choice. So I'm going to try to keep it entertaining here. Warren described this as, we're on the same team, and marketing and direct response, why can't we all get along? I have a very different perspective. So first I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I'm coming from, and then I'm going to share with you the characteristics of this war, and I think you'll recognize it. And then I'm going to show you a way out into the light and how to end this war. Is that fair? All right, well, first I'm going to tell you a little bit about us. But my VP of Business Development said I had to throw these slides up. So there it is, big clients. You got that? Okay, big clients all over the world. We're a digital agency focused on helping you extract the maximum value from your lifetime visitors, or the maximum lifetime value of your website visitors, rather. We have offices in San Diego and Tampa. The one common denominator is there have to be palm trees wherever we plant an office. So anybody want to start our Hawaii office? That's what I'm thinking next. And we work with companies not just to do things for them, but also to teach them to fish. One of our biggest practice areas is what we call conversion management, which basically makes you self-sufficient, makes you a highly effective optimizing organization. So you can have your internal team fix your online channel and do it a lot better. All right, so enough of that. This is really what I want to talk about. There's a war going on between branding and direct response. And I think you'll recognize it when I talk about it. So first I'm going to introduce the combatants, rather. Then I'm going to talk about how to understand branding better, because I think for the direct marketers in the room, there's a lot of misconceptions about branding, its power, where it applies, and so on. And then I'm going to bring both sides together. I'm going to make sure that we can have peace and show you the way forward. All right? So let's start with the direct response view of branding. Now, how many of you here are on the direct response side? This is really easy to do at LeadsCon. Okay. Everybody, right? No, sorry. Are there any branding folks in the room? That should narrow it down. A couple? Okay. Yeah, just a couple. Okay, I'm going to start with insulting you, ma'am. Well, not you personally. I don't know you that well, but we're going to talk about how we direct response marketers view the branding side. Do you ever view the branding folks as restrictive? Oh, we can't do that. That font is not in our style guide. Anybody ever heard that one? I mean, it's ridiculous. We were working with Texas Instruments once, and we were doing a test, a landing page test of their homepage. They gave us a 180-page brand document. Here's how you can have our logo. It can't be next to this. It can't be against this background color. Really? And they would nitpick all that when we showed them our kind of the different versions that we wanted to run in the test. And I'm glad I'm in New York because I get to use this Mad Men reference here. Who thinks of branding people as arrogant? Show of hands. It's like Mad Men style. Oh, the person who is on the branding side thinks, nevertheless, of branding people as arrogant. I like that. Okay. But it's true. Have you ever heard the expression, the hippo? It doesn't mean really fat person. It means the highest paid person's opinion. Well, a lot of times these branding people are highly paid. And they just, well, I don't ever think that this works. That's my opinion. I know it because I'm a master of the universe. You ever gotten that? Anybody had an unsubstantiated opinion substitute for something that needed to be done? Yes, happens all the time. They're also kind of controlling. Do you agree with that? We just had a panel here. What was the panel about? Compliance, regulatory, legal. I'm not saying it's not necessary, but a lot of times it's like, okay, here's the line. Oh, let's go all the way over here so we're not close to that line, right? Oh, you can't test that because that mildly implies or might suggest to 0.1% of people that something bad might happen. Can't get close to that line. Oh no, let's step back. Right? That's how they think. You can't do that. John Wanamaker was a marketing pioneer, the head of the Wanamaker store, and he famously said, half the money that I spend on advertising is wasted. The problem is knowing which half. And that's probably a common thing that we as direct response marketers, that's the beef, the main beef that we often have with the branding people, right? What are you doing? How do you branding people make any money? How are you measuring the impact of what you do? What do you do all day long? Now, that doesn't look like a very flattering picture, right? And they're also visually obsessed. The branding people love to produce very expensive assets. I'm sure in some of your companies they've produced, professional videos, billboards, TV advertising, great stuff, right? But does it have to be clear? No, it just has to be like the picture you see up there, flashy. It's like, wow, that's so stylish, that's so on, that's so fall lookbook in New York City during Mercedes Fashion Week. That's how they think. But you know what the downside of this is? Then they take this same content and they recycle it. So how many of you think that it's appropriate to have a landing page and the same content on it as a giant billboard as you're driving down the freeway at 100 miles an hour? Well, that's what they ask you to do. They say, we produced these very, very, very expensive assets. Now we have to use them everywhere. We have to use them all of our channels. We have to use the same look and feel and pictures and everything else on the web, even though it was never designed for the web. Happens all the time. And so at the end of the day, if you want a conversation ender involving the branding folks, this is what it looks like. Their favorite phrase is, that's off-brand. How do you argue with that? What does that even mean? But this will shut down a lot of money-making things that direct marketers want to do. That's off-brand. And the typical end result of this are websites that look like this. Do you know what the purpose of this website is? To sell clothes. Is that clear to everybody? No, because Armani Exchange's website has these giant graphics on it. Very handsome guy, needs to shave. Ladies? No, you probably like him the way he is. Rough. But is it clear that the purpose of this website is to sell clothes? Doesn't look like it, but the branding people are happy. So, you know what? It doesn't work well, but it looks damn good. That's the end result. All right, well, now I've painted a pretty unflattering picture of the branding folks. Would you agree? Or actually, would you agree that it's accurate? It is accurate, right? But it's unflattering as well. And we're right to hate these people, aren't we? Unfortunately, there are two sides to every story. And there's the brand side view of us, the direct response marketers. One of the keys is, one of the main things that they have against us is that we're ignorant of the big picture. We're fiddling tactically somewhere saying, well, if I make this compliance statement a little bit larger and put it to the left of the button, that's what they think we do all day long. We don't really see the big context into which things fit. And then I bet a few of you will recognize yourselves, if you're honest, in this as well. They think we're just kind of unprofessional buffoons on the direct response side. You also get the sham wow and 3 easy payments, right? That's what they think we do as well. How many of you have been accused of this? being unethical. Oh, you remember how they like to stay way, way, way over here on the other side of that line? Well, they're accusing us of being way, way, way over here on the other side of it. They think that we do stuff that's really, really sketchy. And a lot of times we do. We had a client once in insurance lead generation, and incidentally, we work with EDU, financial services, all kinds of industries for B2B and B2C lead gen. And one of our insurance clients had to put this compliance statement on their page. And technically at the time, the FTC regulations were it had to be above the call to action. So we're coming up with a test plan of different versions to improve the performance of that page with this new compliance statement text that had to be on there. Easy enough, right? You know what their suggestion was? Do you know where they wanted to put that compliance text? Guesses, anyone? In the wrong place. Well, which wrong place? Yeah, not in the meta information. That wouldn't even display on the page. But they wanted it to be in the header. Anybody read text in a header of a page? No, we don't. That's why they want it in the header. And technically, was it above the call to action? Heck yeah, it was way above the call to action. It was in the header of the page. And that was their solution. Now, is that unethical? I think it's definitely pushing the boundaries of the intent of that regulation. Wouldn't you agree? And so they think we're just basically crooks. And they don't also respect our compliance with this long momentum of everything that they've done to create the brand. And they think we're like these odd mismatched socks that I'm showing here. Everything else, everywhere else in the universe reflects our company and our brand, but the direct response guys are over here doing something completely different. And so this is what they think of us. They think we're these people that sit in the back room and say, we should test that. Everything is settled by doing a split test, seeing which version performs better. You know, I call it bar bet settling. Green button, orange button. Doesn't really matter. I mean, it does, but that's not optimization. I have this discussion a lot. We had the Path to Conversion Day yesterday. I know we have some folks here that were in that. And there are quite a few folks that are from testing-only agencies where they'll do split tests for you. And my problem with that is that all of optimization is now collapsed down to this whatever works mentality. It's about testing velocity, how many tests can we run, it's whatever works, and you get this kind of archaeological dig of features that worked from the last test on top of features that worked from the previous test, and so on, and you get this Frankenstein monster at the end of the day, but it's, you know what? It tests really well. So here's the typical end result. This is how branding views us. Only 3 easy payments of $19.95. Wait, you get the second one free. Just pay shipping and handling. That's basically how they see us. And so this is our kind of mantra. Works better than everything else we've tested. Do you see how ugly this war is? Do you see how far apart these worldviews are? How do you bridge the gap? That's what I want to talk about next. So branding is a complicated subject. I just want to give you some insights that we've gleaned over the years about the true nature of branding. I want to give you a better understanding of it. And then I'm going to talk about how to marry the two and bring them together, how to save this branding versus direct response dichotomy. So this is what most of us think of as branding. Shouting at the world, right? Branding is advertising. Branding is buying media. Branding is billboards. Branding is TV commercials. It's packaging. It's your store signage if you have that kind of thing. But basically, it's here, we're projecting a brand out at you. You're just passively consuming a brand that we inject into you. That's the mentality. So let me give you some insights into just characteristics of brands that are pretty much universal. Established brands are hard to change. Any of you had any experience with the Navy or been in the Navy or anything like that? So there's this maneuver. When you try to turn an aircraft carrier around, I forget what it's called, like the Jackson turn or something like it. Basically, you have an aircraft carrier doing 35 knots, and you want to do a 180. Okay? And the way you do that is you basically slam on the brakes and, tilt the steering wheel. It's not a steering wheel. Not sure what you call it. And you basically bank the whole thing at a 12-degree angle until it comes around the other way. Do you know how much distance it takes to execute a 180 with an aircraft carrier, even with an extreme maneuver like that? Anyone want to guess? I think it's called the Jackson turn or Johnson turn or something like that. 1 mile. 1 mile, not 300 yards, 1 mile. When you have that much momentum, when you have a floating city like that going in a certain direction, changing its momentum is very, very difficult. So if you've an established brand, there's not much you can do to change that perception. Let me ask, are there any Comcast clients in the room? Okay. This is what happens when I Google Comcast sucks. I get, about 250,000 results. So all of you Comcast sufferers out there, I'm sorry. But everybody hates Comcast, am I right? You're a client of theirs? Do you hate them? Very much so, yes. Everybody hates Comcast. Can they change this brand reputation? No, not without a whole generation of their clients dying. That's what it's going to take, basically. Am I right? 224,000 results on Comcast sucks. Oldsmobile at one point realized that their whole demographic was dying off. And so they came up in the 80s with this ad. Some of you old folks like me might remember it. And they said their tagline was this is not your father's Oldsmobile. Right? Oh, that's going to sway me. Oh, good. It's not my father's Oldsmobile. It's actually more like my grandfather's Oldsmobile. Right? Did it work? Well, they did this whole rebranding, but in 2004, after 108 years of existence, Oldsmobile went out of business because they couldn't change the trajectory of their brand. It was just too strong and had too much momentum. All right, well, let's talk about brands in another way. Brands are also ladders and shortcuts. And I'm stealing some of this material. I'll give you the book references at the end. But let's talk about them first as a shortcut. I'm going to ask you a simple question. Name a toothpaste brand. Shout it out. We're in a big room. Crest. Colgate, if you got a few. Wait, sorry, did you say? Oh, wow, that was amazing. How did I do that? Did you say Crest? Did you say Colgate? All right. It's the amazing powers of mental deduction here, and I'm just a magician. Name 20 more toothpastes. It's kind of hard, isn't it? Yeah. Guess what? There are lots of them. These are just ones I grabbed, but at my supermarket, I asked them, they said there are over 200 toothpaste brands that they sell in the toothpaste aisle. But Crest and Colgate dominate. Now, Reese and Trout back in the 70s wrote a fantastic book called The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, and they talked about brand ladders. And the basic idea is simple. In your area, in your whatever your specialization is, the top brand gets all of the profits. They call them the gorilla. And then there's a couple of chimps that fight for second place. And then the rest of the little monkeys don't make any money at all. That's how it is in any industry. So when, for example, Jack Welch decided to take over General Electric, the first thing he did is he looked at all of their subsidiaries and he said, if we can't, within 18 months, be number one or number two in that sector, we need to sell that company off right now. If there's no viable path to being the dominant brand in whatever niche you define that they operate in, let's sell it off because there's no money to be made. And that was a really, really good call. So you can think of a brand also being a shortcut. If I say luxury car maker, shout it out. Mercedes, okay. Porsche, okay. I put that more in like the sports car category, but it's a luxury car as well. If I said beautiful island in the Caribbean, that's a brand too. Shout it out. Bahamas, okay. St. Thomas, somebody said, right? That's a destination can be a brand, right? If I said coffin manufacturer, What is it? No takers? Actually, you know what the biggest coffee manufacturer is, or at least retailer? In the U.S., Costco. Costco sells the largest number of coffins in the U.S. Strange fact, you don't have to remember that part. But what's important is that if you have a lot of exposure to a brand, it achieves this status. It essentially becomes a shortcut. We don't have to think. We go down that supermarket aisle and we grab our brand. Are the other 200 plus toothpaste on that aisle viable alternatives? Yeah, they're probably just as good. But the brand serves as a mental shortcut. Anyone have extra time on their hands these days? No, we live in a very, very busy world. And so anything we can do on autopilot is actually good because it saves us thinking. So if your brand actually achieves shortcut status, that's a very powerful place to be. All right, other insights about brands. A brand is also a frame. What do I mean by that? Well, let me ask you a simple question, right? I'm going to show you two sets of squares, one inside of another, and you tell me which inner square is the darker one. Ready? Okay, take a look. Oops, go back. Spoil the effect. Which inner square is the darker one? The one on the left, right? It's darker. The one on the right is clearly lighter. But if we take that context away and show you the two actual inner squares, untouched, unretouched, this is exactly what they're like. They're the same. So the context matters. So think of it this way. In your brain, you basically have the primitive parts of your brain and then the conscious parts of your brain. The conscious part gets tired easily. It's very slow, but it's deliberate. It can do very complex calculations, judge all of our social relationships, where we stand in the pack, and that kind of thing. The subconscious stuff is there, shared with all mammals, with all reptiles. Some parts of it go back 1 billion years, that part of the brain, right? And they're there to do things automatically. And they take in massive amounts of information all the time. Think about how much information is coming into your body right now. Visual information, auditory information, pressure, temperature. I forget what it's called, like proprioception or something like that, where it's like the relationship of your body parts to each other. When you raise this leg, how does that change, the relationship to the rest of you? All of this information all the time, and it's being processed. It never slows down. It never gets tired. It makes decisions for you automatically. Most of what we do is on autopilot. So the way to think about it is the brand is operating on that subconscious, primitive part of the brain. And you can't avoid its effects. So the unconscious background frames the foreground experience, what we think of as conscious thought. And we all like to think we're rational. It's something I talked about in my keynote on Path to Conversion yesterday. But we're not. We don't make decisions rationally. Most of the time, it's our unconscious mind that makes these decisions. Let me show you an example of this. And I'm using these commercials from the 80s because, well, that's how old I am. How many of you remember the Folgers instant coffee TV commercials? Anybody old enough to remember? Okay, a few of us, gray hairs in the room, or no hairs. So the basic premise was they would have somebody say, we've secretly replaced the coffee in this fine, 3-star Michelin restaurant with Folgers crystals. Let's hear what real diners think. And then they'd have all of these testimonials like, oh, it's very, very rich, delicious, the best coffee I've ever tasted. Where can I get this stuff? This is amazing. Well, it happens to be on the bottom shelf of your gas station mini mart. That's where it lives. Folgers crystal. Does anybody actually know what a coffee crystal is? It's kind of a bizarre concept. Why did this happen? How can this be? I mean, these are nice restaurants. We're talking about like Tavern on the Green here in New York, just the top-end restaurants all over the country. They did this over and over and over and had the same results. It's because Folgers wasn't the brand experience. The famous restaurant was the brand experience. It was the frame of the restaurant that made the coffee taste good. It's when you drove up to it. It's when you anticipated going there. It's when you got dressed up that evening. It's when they valeted your car and called you by your first name and sat you at that table and with a flourish put the napkin on your lap, right? And then that guy came around with the little crumb scooper between every course and took it off the perfectly starched white linen tablecloths. That was the brand frame. It was the restaurant, not the coffee. So think of it this way. Brands provide the context in which we can increase the perceived value of our product. And that can be a very powerful thing. And appearance does matter, by the way. There's a definition, and this is from the American Marketing Association. They probably know a bit about branding. And this is how they define brand. And if you read that, you'll see that it mostly has to do with the physical representation of it, with the brand frame, if you will, right? Logos, colors, appearance, and so on. So I'm going to ask you with words to do a simple exercise. You ready? Name a cigarette brand represented by tall black letters. Quick, shout it out. Marlboro. Okay, look at the input I'm giving you, the stimulus. All I said was tall black letters, right? Tall black letters. It already evoked a brand for you. If I show you this, what's the brand? Marlboro still, right? Now, that's not their name. That's just some letters out of the middle of the name. You could see the full name, and you definitely think that's Marlboro. That's the brand, right? How about I give you a different kind of perspective or way of thinking about it? What if I said, name a cigarette brand that is represented by the solid red color? Marlboro. Yeah, Marlboro. If I did this as an input to your brain, it thinks Marlboro. That's just the color red. And if I did the chevron, which is kind of the top of their pack, you'd definitely be thinking Marlboro. But first, remember, I started with the words, the color red. Then I showed you a field of the color red. Then I showed you more of their trade dress in the form of that chevron, right? Well, what about if I gave you another text stimulus, which would be lone cowboy on the range? Marlboro, right? What about this ad? They actually ran this in magazines in the late 70s. And this is pretty gutsy when you think about it. There's increasing pressure about what they could and couldn't say. They had the disclaimer compliance warning. Should be familiar to a lot of you. The guy isn't even smoking. That's a pretty gutsy move for a cigarette commercial. Just put the trade dress and the guy. How about this? What is this a commercial for? Which cigarette brand? Marlboro, right? Is this powerful? Does this evoke Marlboro? By the way, I mean, don't smoke. It's really bad. It causes cancer. Obviously, but the reason I picked Marlboro, it is probably one of the most iconic brands in the world. That's how powerful it is in all of these representations. Guess what? I have a little news flash for you. That's not a Marlboro ad. I just typed in lone cowboy on the range, which was the same words I was using before, and I took a stock photograph that came up in Google image search. And I show you that picture. You guys are already branded on Marlboro when I mentioned cigarette brands. And you know why? Because the underlying mental model of rugged masculinity and independence is where it maps in your head. So originally when they came up with this campaign, this quick backstory, it was actually a brand that was there in the 20s, and then they started doing filtered cigarettes. It was a woman's brand. Their original tagline was mild as May. No kidding. Mild as May. And then they had to put filters on them, and they said, oh, geez, guys aren't going to smoke those, wimpy filtered cigarettes, and get the full flavor or anything. So they had to guyify it a bit. So they decided that they're going to have this rugged masculinity campaign. And some of the concepts that they used were a construction worker, a sea captain, a war correspondent, and a weightlifter. These are going to be follow-on ads after the cowboy. And they all evoke this notion of rugged masculinity, right? But the cowboy was so successful, they just kind of stopped on that one and used that for decades. And as far as I know, they still use it. So trade dress can be very powerful, but it can also be easily manipulated. What is this brand? Anybody here from Colorado? Okay. What's the most popular brand in the world? Yeah, Coca-Cola, right? Any Spanish speakers in the room? Take a closer look. That's not Coca-Cola. That's a manipulation of Coca-Cola. It says eat excrement. Yeah, be polite. All right. But here's the thing. A lot of you probably don't even have a brand. Let me ask you a question. Well, I just blew it again. Do you recognize any of the items on this list? Anybody? Anybody? Raise your hand if you recognize any of the specific items on the list. Okay, which one, sir?
The Polaroid cube.
The Polaroid cube. Okay, so what's the Polaroid cube?
Basically, it's like a small action camera type thing.
Small action camera. Okay, good. Okay, do you have one?
No, but I used to sell them.
You used to sell them. Okay, the only person in the room that recognized any of those is the person that used to sell one of them. So what are these? I mean, they're from big names. You have the Sony, Polaroid, Garmin, right? HTC, Rollei, which is a really high-end camera. What are these things? Yeah, they're cameras. They're actually, there's the article citation at the bottom, the list of the 2016 GoPro alternatives. Anybody heard of GoPro? Raise your hand. Yeah, everybody's heard of GoPro. Remember what I was telling you about the leader in each area? None of the others are leaders. They're not the gorilla. They're not even the chimps. They're tiny little monkeys. And a lot of you are probably having this argument with your boss, and he's telling you this branding stuff that you have to pay attention to as a direct response marketer. And you should go back at her and say, hey, we don't have a brand. No one inside of our industry, certainly not outside of our industry, knows it. The brand is in your brand documents. It's not in people's heads. We're not even in the consideration set, so let's not kid ourselves. So that's a problem, isn't it, for you as trying to harness the power of your brand. Well, without a brand, you don't have some of that power of the brand, but the good news is you have the freedom to see what actually resonates for your audience. And this is where the direct response folks step in. So I'm going to describe a new way forward, how to unify these. The first insight is that both branding and direct response are right, but like that famous fable of the people, the blind men touching the elephant, depending on which part you touch, you get a different impression. Both are blind also. So to get the full picture, you have to understand this. The brand lives inside the minds of your customers. And this is why John Wanamaker, again, said, when a customer enters my store, forget me, she is king. He's a little more sexist, but keeping up with the times. And I really love this definition of branding from this book, Groundswell. It says, your brand is whatever the customers say it is. It's that simple, folks. The brand is not something that you bullhorn and project onto the world. It's what's already out there. It's the Comcast sucks. So you have to understand that. So the brand is the underlying mental associations evoked in people's heads. In other words, I can use the color red. I can use the concept of tall black letters. I can use a cowboy picture with nothing else in the ad. And it still evokes this underlying concept of rugged independence and masculinity in your head, which then maps to the brand. So here's our goal as direct response marketers, and that is to align the presentation of the brand with, align the presentation with the brand frame. Now here, I'm going to borrow somebody else's framework. Again, I'll mention these books at the end, but Phil Barden wrote a great book called Decoded. And he talks about these kind of underlying, again, unconscious motivations that all of us have for making decisions, taking action, and so on. So he came up with this wheel in the form of a spider chart. And these are things that motivate us: adventure, autonomy, discipline, security, enjoyment, and excitement. Okay? And the way these spider charts work, the further you go from the center, the more activated that axis is. Okay? So I'm going to give you a practical example. I'm going to design a car ad. You ready? This is my ad. Welcome to your new weekend view, the exhilarating new sports coupe from. What do you guys think of this as messaging for a new sports coupe? It's good, right? Does it put you in the driver's seat, literally, imagining what it's going to be like? This is your new weekend view. When you get off of work and being a wage slave, this is it. You're going to go for a ride in your new sports coupe. Now, let's take a look at it kind of in isolation, objectively, without the brand frame, and talk about what it activates. Well, you'll probably agree that this is really high on autonomy and adventure and excitement and enjoyment, not so much on the discipline or security side. I mean, let's face it, if you're doing that in that car, at some point there's a guardrail and a ditch in your future, right? So, security is probably not top of mind for you. Fair? Fair to say? So this isn't quantitative, but you can generally see the qualitative mapping of the things that this ad would activate in isolation. Okay, now let's put it into a brand frame. Let's start with the BMW brand frame. Now, this is what BMW is known for, right? High performance, precision, excitement, right? And of course, since they're a full-range car company, they can't have a really skewed kind of representation like our ad. They don't just sell sports coupes. So it's a little more balanced, their kind of motivations, the psychological motivations, but their implicit goals still skew towards excitement and enjoyment, and not so much on the kind of security or discipline side. So let's actually view this as an ad. Your new weekend view, the exhilarating new sports coupe from BMW with their logo, and that's it. Who thinks this ad works? Raise your hand. Who thinks this has a high degree of coherency in your mind, in that brand frame? Yeah, it does, because the two overlap. The messaging in the ad and the underlying brand promise or brand representation that exists in your head for what implicit goals BMW activates. It's a very high degree of overlap. The congruence is high. Now let's try this in a different brand frame. Let's try this in the Volvo brand frame. When I say Volvo, I'm guessing 95% of you are thinking that car, right? Now, that's a 20-year-old car, but that's what we still think of as Volvo. So it's safe, it's functional, it's quirky in a Swedish way, it's boring, but that's their brand frame. If I had to map it out, it would kind of look like that. It skews towards autonomy, meaning you're an individualist and you're kind of weird. Discipline, security, certainly. What's the number one thing that Volvo's been pounding into our heads for 70 years? Safety, security, right? Volvos are safe. So now let's experience the ad in that brand frame. Does it work? Welcome to your new weekend view, the exhilarating new sports coupe from Volvo. Doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work because there's very low overlap between the ad messaging and the brand frame. And remember, you can't change the brand frame. So look at the degree of overlap here. It's very, very small. So let's take a look at the reality. Here's a concept coupe from BMW. Does this work? This is the car we're actually trying to sell. Does it work with my ad? Yeah. Who thinks so? All right. Here's another concept coupe from BMW. Does it work? Hands up if you think that works. Absolutely. Great BMW coupe. Oh, wait. Can you take a look at the grille on that car? Yeah, folks. It's a Volvo. This is their sports coupe. It kicks ass. They benchmark not just BMW, but other car makers to produce this. And it's really, really good. And in fact, over the decades, they've created a lot of great sports coupes. The problem is they haven't sold many of them because it doesn't fit the brand frame. It may be objectively correct. All of that messaging may be right. You will have a great time driving it, but it doesn't fit the brand frame. So let's talk about how to bring these two parts together. We are fighting on the same side. I'll agree with Warren on that. And this is how the steps you need to go through as a company to get more powerful results. The first is reality check your brand. Take off the rose-colored glasses, have no illusions about it. You need to know what it stands for. The best way to do this is go on social media. There's all kinds of sentiment analysis tools, and first of all, see if your brand pops up at all, if anyone's ever heard of it. Second of all, go see what they're saying about it. Survey some existing customers. You'll find all kinds of fun stuff out. Or better yet, if you have direct access to them, talk to the customer service people that are manning your phones. you will get an earful about the reality of your brand in the only place that matters, which is the head of your customers. That's where the brand lives, remember. And then be, again, realistic about what your brand activates. Which of these subconscious goals is it really playing to? Is it adventure, excitement, autonomy? Where does it supposed to work? I mean, for example, if you had one of our lead gen clients was ADT, home security. I mean, security would be really strongly activated by ADT, right? Maybe autonomy as well, but excitement and enjoyment? Really? I'm going to put that blue ADT sign in my front yard, and oh, that was exciting. It's never going to play. If you say, the exciting new wireless home burglary system from ADT. No, it's not exciting. It's a necessary evil. So understand what motivates your whole product category and the brand of your business in particular, the existing brand. Because one of the things you need to do is to make sure there's congruency between them. Make sure the offers that you're putting out are actually in alignment with the brand frame. Because if they don't fit, it won't work. Now here's where we have fun as direct marketers, playing with the triggers. What's going to make them act? That's why I really enjoy what we do. Conversion rate optimization is all about getting people to pull the trigger. And the good news is it can be a variety of triggers. As long as we understand the promise of our brand and how to align the messaging with it, we can say things in different ways. We can represent things differently. We can use different imagery and videos and text on the page and in all of our advertising to evoke that congruence that I was talking about. And ideally, if the brand isn't really dominant and you have some say in it, you feed that stuff back in. It goes back into the brand. Oh, in reality, this is what works. So maybe we should update our brand to reflect that, because that's what it's really activating. And if we can resonate for that group of visitors, and this is what they care about, and this is what gets them off the couch and on the phone or filling out our form, then maybe that should be part of our brand. So it's like a laboratory where we get to experiment and feed this stuff back into the brand side. So I mentioned I'm going to give you some reading assignments. Again, all this will be in the deck, which you'll get after the show. These are some quick books that I recommend you read. Susan Weinshank, who's keynoted at our conversion conference events, she wrote this great book, 100 Things That All Designers Need to Know About People. And it talks about some of the latest neuromarketing literature and how to do visual biasing, how to framing and context, and things like that. Really easy, short chapters. Same goes with Roger Dooley, another one of our past keynotes. He wrote a great summary of the latest neuromarketing stuff in his book, Brainfluence. So I'd recommend both of those. How many of you have heard of Robert Cialdini and his book, Influence? Okay, that's good. A good portion of the room. The rest of you need to go get this book. It's called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. And he talks about general principles that operate on all human beings in order to sway our behavior and get us to do something. Like reciprocity. You always arrive as a guest somewhere with a gift. You give it to the host, and then they're obligated to receive you. If you came without a gift, what kind of doofus are you? What rock have you been living on, right? Social proof, seeing lots of people doing it. Here in New York, right? You're walking down the street, there's a restaurant with a line out the door and an empty one. Which one are you going to go in? The one with the line. Because look, all these other people are queuing up, I might as well. It's like this herd mentality. I don't have to think, I can just use somebody else's experience or the visual proof that it even is popular, just the line out the door, in order to make my decision. Remember, the brain doesn't like to think. It likes to take shortcuts. So the shortcuts can be taken advantage of. So how can you manifest social proof? That's another one. Martin Lindstrom's book, Biology, there's this whole exploding field of neuroscience right now, of applying neuroscience specifically to marketing, putting people into fMRI machines and then showing them stuff and seeing what their brain does before it even reaches that conscious level. And so his book has some great insights about that. This is one of my more recent favorites, Phil Barton's book, Decoded. Highly recommend that as well. He was an ad exec with consumer brands in the UK but really married that up with a lot of this behavioral economics and neuromarketing stuff to create this more unified framework. And finally, Reese and Trout's book, Never Gets Old, The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, highly recommended. Very easy read as well. And my own book, which Warren was kind enough to mention as well. Actually, I'm going to give away some of these. Okay, so hang out here for a second and I'll talk about that. So a bunch of reading. Please go read these books. Think of them not as books or paperweights, but rather as katanas, weapons for you to chop through the bamboo of your competitor's crap. Okay? I wanted, if you like what you've heard here, if you're interested in learning more about optimizing online experiences, I highly recommend that you check out Conversion Conference. We have shows coming up in Europe, in London, and Berlin in the fall, but the main US show is in Las Vegas in April. Hope to see many of you there. It's a fantastic 2-day show. You'll learn a lot, drinking from the fire hose kind of stuff. And like I said, I want to give away some of my books. I brought a couple of boxes of them. So what I'd like you to do is take out your phone. You have one, right? Anyone not have a smartphone? Just email me, tim@sitetuners.com, and make the subject line something like, I want the book. Simple as that. You want to tell me why? I do use that in my decision making. That's the brand frame in which I make my decision, is your email. Okay, just putting that out there. And after lunch, I'll announce them. I'll just email the winners. You can pick them up. If you win a book, you can pick it up at the registration desk. They'll have them there with your name on them. Okay? If you want to reach out to me, I'm very approachable and very sociable. I think I have a few more friends below my Facebook 5,000 person limit. So glad to talk to you. I know you probably have some questions. I'm going to be around through lunch. I'll actually stick around here after the show, after this presentation, and be glad to talk to all of you. So unless you're rushing off to lunch or the expo hall, I want to thank you for your time, and hopefully you learned something.
Thanks to Tim for that great presentation. Just to let you know, the expo hall is going to be opening in just a couple of minutes. Just take the escalators out here down to level 2, and you'll be able to get in. Lunch is now also going to be served in the Mercury Ballroom, which is just down the hall here. Just go out the doors, take a right, and go down toward the end, and you'll see Mercury Ballroom for lunch. We will kick off the afternoon sessions at 1:30, so we hope you'll come join us. They will all be down on level 2 as well. So come find us and get some more great content. Thank you all for coming this morning.